Chapter 9. The Key. That night, after all the clocks had been inspected and cleaned, Hugo opened the magic book. He read it from cover to cover, then reread his favorite parts, memorizing whole sections, practicing with whatever he could find around his room. But even as he fanned out his cards or rolled a coin across the backs of his finger, he found himself thinking about Isabel. Hugo finally put the book down. She said she would try to help him get his notebook back. Isabel had called him her friend, but how could he be her friend when he had so many secrets? He didn't have any secrets to keep when he was friends with Antonio and Louis. He wished that Isabel would just go away. Before he got ready for bed, Hugo took out the mechanical man and looked through all the little parts he'd stolen since he started working at the booth. Suddenly, it was as if a light went on in his head. Hugo saw how, with just a little work, one of his pieces would fit into the man's arm socket. He pulled out his toolkit and cut and filled the metal, bending it until it finally snapped neatly into place. For the first time, Hugo had fixed something on the mechanical man without guidance from the notebook. His heart beat hard. What if he could fix a mechanical man without using the notebook? After all, who knew how long the old man was going to make him work? And what if the girl was still lying and the notebook really was burned? He wasn't sure he could do it, but until the notebook was actually in his hands, he would try. The week passed quickly. Hugo was more tired than ever. He hardly got any sleep because at the end of the day, after taking care of the clocks and working at the booth, he would stay up until dawn working on the automaton. He made much progress, and he knew he was getting very close to finishing. Whenever the time came to meet Isabel and Etienne at the theater, he didn't want to break the promise. So he made excuses to the old man, left the station, and ran to the cinema. He snuck around back, where he found Isabel waiting for him. Papa George's must have hidden your notebook really well, she said, but I think I might have an idea where it is. Hugo wondered if he should remind her not to look inside it. He decided not to. Why doesn't he want you to go into the movies? Hugo asked. I don't know. Maybe he thinks it's a waste of time. He's never said why. I bet my parents would have let me go to the movies. Isabel looked at Hugo as if she was hoping he'd ask her a question about the parents, but he didn't. So she just kept talking. My parents died when I was a baby, said Isabel. And Papa George's and Mama Jean were my godparents, so they took me in and raised me. They're very nice, except when it comes to the movies. Hugo said nothing in response, so finally Isabel said, I wonder where Etienne is. He usually opens the door for me by now. Hugo cautiously slipped around to the front of the theater and looked for Etienne. The manager of the theater, whose thin black hair was slicked across the top of his head, opened the door and said to Hugo, What do you want? The cigarette that dangled from his lips moved up and down as he spoke. I'm looking for Etienne. The man stared at him. He has an eye patch, said Hugo. I know who Etienne is, said the man as he smoothed his hair across his head and flicked his ashes toward Hugo. I just fired him. We discovered that he was sneaking children into the theater. Isn't that a terrible thing to do? He glared at Hugo. Hugo backed away from the door, ran behind the theater, told Isabel what had happened. What an awful man. Follow me, Isabel said. She walked to the rear door and took out a bobby pin from her pocket. Hugo watched as she filled the pin inside the lock until it clicked and the door opened. "How did you learn to do that?" asked Hugo. "Books," answered Isabel. Isabel poked her head inside to make sure no one was watching, then held the door open for Hugo. They entered the back of the lobby where photographs from upcoming films were tacked to display case. Isabel stopped for a moment and looked at one of those pictures, a black and white photograph of an actress with very dark eyes. "Sometimes I think I like these photos as much as I like the movies," she said. "You can make up your own story when you look at a photo." Hugo looked at the picture, but then Isabel said, "Quick, the manager's coming." She and Hugo hurried from the lobby into the theater, sank down into the soft red velvet seats in the back row, and waited for the movie to start. So here's a picture of curtains. They're waiting for the movie to start, and the curtains will open if the movie starts. And then here's another picture of the curtain opens. And then here's the stage, and they're ready to watch the movie. Here's the picture of the lights starting the whole movie. And they're probably getting excited. Here's a picture of Hugo smiling because he's really happy that he gets to see a movie. The blank white screen reminded Hugo of a brand new piece of paper, and he loved the wonderful whirring sound from the projector that filled the theater. First came the newsreels, each one a few minutes long, about current events around the world. There was one about the Depression in America, one about a World's Fair that would be opening in Paris in a few months. Hugo thought that sounded exciting, although he knew he'd never be able to go. And one about politics in Germany. And then finally a cartoon began. It was called The Clock Store. In it, an old man was lighting street lamps as night fell, and he passed the clock store. Inside, all the clocks were alive. They were dancing to classical music. Hugo knew his father would have loved it. In the end, the music grew wider as two alarm clocks had a fight. The curtains closed, everyone applauded, and the projections changed the reels. After a few moments, the curtains opened again and the main feature, The Million by a director named Reine Claire, began. It was about an artist, a lost lottery ticket, a criminal, a borrowed coat, and an opera singer. And it had one of the most amazing chase sequences that Hugo could ever imagine. He thought every good story should end with a big, exciting chase. Time passed quickly in the darkness, and as the lights came up, Hugo didn't want the afternoon to end. He and Isabel looked at each other, their eyes still shining from the flickering images. Everyone filed out of the theater until the children were alone in their seats in the back of the room. Hugo stared at the screen as if he were still seeing the projected light, still hearing the sound. Suddenly, Hugo and Isabel were grabbed by their collars and hoisted to their feet. "How did you two rats get in here?" the manager barked. Cigarette ashes fell on their heads. The children managed to take their coats and were dumped outside on the wet sidewalk in front of the theater. "And I better not see you here again." The manager closed the glass doors, wiped his hand, and glared at them until they ran away, brushing ash from their hair. Once they were out of sight of the theater, they slowed to a walk. The air was cold and they shivered. Isabel told Hugo about other movies she loved, comedies and cartoons and cowboy movies starring someone named Tom Mix. There was an actress she'd seen named Louis Brooks who had a haircut that Isabel had copied. There were adventure stories and mysteries and love stories and fantasies. She said names like Charlie Chaplin, Jean Reno, and Buster Keaton. Hugo has seen a few Buster Keaton movies and 2 Charlie Chaplin movies, but for some reason he didn't share this with Isabel. He just listened. Soon they arrived back at the station. As they entered the waiting room, Hugo noticed someone standing very still, looking up at the main clock, taking notes on a clipboard. It was the station inspector. Hugo grabbed Isabel and ducked behind a bench nearby. He rubbed the buttons on his coat. "What are you doing?" Isabel said, straightening herself up. But Hugo was lost in thought. Had the station inspector begun investigating and found out that Hugo's uncle was gone? Hugo couldn't be taken away now. Now when he was so close to finishing The Mechanical Man, he knew he should have gone to the movies. He never should have left the station. Hugo's heart raced. He had to get into the walls to check the clocks, but Isabel was still talking. He hadn't heard anything she had said for the last few minutes. When he thought it was safe, he got up and started walking in the opposite direction from the station inspector. "Answer me, Hugo," she said as she caught onto his arm. "Don't just run away. I've got to go." "That's what I mean. Go where?" "I was asking you where you lived." Hugo stopped short and stared at her. "I don't know anything about you," she said. "You know where I live. You know about my parents. If we're going to be friends, then I think I should know about you. Why don't you tell me?" Suddenly, Hugo started to run. "Hugo," she yelled. "Stop! Wait for me!" So here's a picture of the station. Here's Hugo running. And then here's the girl. She's like, "Stop! Wait for me, Hugo." There. Then here's a picture of her getting caught with someone else. The girl getting caught with someone else. And then here's a picture of the girl. She has a key on her necklace. And then she fell. And she bumped into someone. And then Hugo looks back and saw her fall. And then Hugo runs back to try to help the girl. Here's a picture of Hugo's hand. Hugo's giving his hand so then the girl can get up. Here's a picture of the girl grabbing his hand and getting up. Here's a picture of the key we saw earlier when there was another picture. And it seems kind of important. Hugo helped Isabel to her feet, but he couldn't stop staring at the key. Isabel noticed and tucked it back into her dress. "Where did you get that?" Hugo whispered. "Tell me where you live." Neither of them said a word. Without warning, Isabel started running again, and this time Hugo chased her. Finally, she stopped at the cafe table and sat down, out of breath. Hugo sat down, too. One of the train station pigeons walked up to the table and pecked at some crumbs on the floor. "Why are you so interested in my key?" Isabel demanded. "Tell me where you got it." A steam engine whistled its deafening shriek, which completely drowned out all the other sounds of the station for a moment and made Hugo jump. As it always did, Hugo and Isabel stared at each other until the owner of the cafe made them get up and leave. They parted without saying goodbye. If you like this video, please like, share, subscribe, and hit the notification bell.